Thank you. Well, the genetic information track is actually kind of a different track. It's an emerging track. It's at kind of an earlier stage of inception. So we're still really dialoguing and struggling through several ideas. So it does have less cohesion, but I think sort of that lack of definition is one of its greatest assets because we were still really able to struggle through some ideas. And I think a track is often defined by who comes and who shows up. So many of those in attendance were working to influence policy and legislation, while others contributed their academic sensibilities to push back on some of the definitions and language we are using. So it was a great track in terms of really that sort of activism, academic dialogue. So we did have a daunting task. It was to interrogate the rights and responsibilities concerning genetic information and to question this polarity between individualism and the common good. And I have a sense that this is probably going on in some of the other tracks as well. But this guiding objective forced us to consider how genetic information circulates across a variety of different genetic technologies. And it also made visible the potential of this group as this space to kind of generate connectivity across different technologies and social justice concerns in order to translate them into policy. So in that sense, maybe genetic governance might be a more appropriate name for this track as it was emerging this week. So in terms of what we addressed, I saw this kind of productive dialogue between some tensions between genetic data, genetic information, and genetic knowledge, and kind of parsing some of those out. So first, we addressed the particular materiality around genetic data itself and asked what specific genetic data and materials are at issue in various different technologies. So for instance, we spoke about people sending saliva samples to various labs through direct-to-consumer testing, about DNA evidence for forensic databases, about patented breast cancer isolated genes used to develop breast cancer testing, and about human tissue samples obtained from human research subjects, which are then used for secondary purposes. And second, we struggled with how genetic data is or is not being translated into useful information. Who is using this information? What does genetic data really tell us? Does it provide the most useful information about our health? How is it limited? Is genetic information the best tool for serving crime? Is genetic information personal, or is it a common good? In both sessions, there was discussion about getting the public to move away from this paradigm that more genetic data and information is better. And third, another key theme centered around how genetic information is being used and applied to make knowledge claims about our bodies and identities that reinforce a biogenetic determinism. So how do we develop governance structures that work at the core to disrupt notions of genetic determinism? What language can we use that creates a sense of urgency around genetic information and builds the types of relationships we want to imagine and facilitate? So in sorting through these questions, we were offered one hopeful model of an ongoing informed consent process, whereby researchers are actually developing long-term relationships with human subjects research, going back and asking permission to use their information for secondary purposes. This generated a discussion of the tensions between the rights of individual human subjects versus the need for biomedical research for the common good. And we also questioned, why is it that practices of informed consent are being emphasized and required to do so much work? What other models and relationships with other legal governance structures, other biomedical models can we start to think about? At its conclusion, our session began to question the very language and metaphor of genetic information itself. How does the notion of information limit our discussions, public education campaigns, and advocacy? So where do we go from here? I believe that precisely the genetic information track provides a forum to discuss more broadly at this time the values and norms across a variety of genetic technologies and how to translate this into policy. And this is where a discussion of the core biopolitical values that I'm sure all of us were wrestling with can take place in a more positive vision of genomics can emerge. So I don't have, at this time, we don't have a lot of particular policy initiatives or outcomes, but we're questioning and trying to move forward in terms of wanting to address Indigenous knowledge, wanting to address more global context, and also moving away and sort of inadvertently creating knowledge silos by asking, how does genetic information change in terms of personalized medicine and racial markers, ARTs? So it was a space where a lot of similar dialogues were going on, but it was concerned around policy. So I want to thank you, and I think this genetic information group is going to be emerging in multiple different directions at this time. So thanks.